In a quiet little town surrounded by lush green trees and peaceful streets, there lived a woman named Eleanor Grayson. To most people, she was a remarkable figure, someone who had risen from humble beginnings to become one of the wealthiest individuals in the country. Her story was often told in newspapers and magazines, how she started with nothing but sheer determination and turned it into billions through smart investments and innovative ideas. But despite her success, Eleanor wasn't just known for her money. She was also known for being an overprotective mother. Eleanor's entire world revolved around her son, Ethan. From the moment he was born, she poured all her love, energy, and hopes into raising him. He was her pride and joy, a bright, curious boy with a mind that never seemed to stop asking questions. As Ethan grew older, his fascination with science deepened. By the time he reached high school, he was already dreaming of becoming an astrophysicist. His room was filled with books about space, models of planets, and posters of galaxies. Whenever someone asked him what he wanted to do when he grew up, Ethan would excitedly talk about discovering new stars or solving the mysteries of black holes. To Eleanor, Ethan wasn't just her child, he was her future. She imagined him traveling the world, making groundbreaking discoveries, and leaving a lasting legacy. She believed that together, they could conquer anything life threw their way. And so, she did everything in her power to give him the best opportunities. Private tutors, summer programs at prestigious universities, state-of-the-art telescopes. It didn't matter how much it cost. If it helped Ethan chase his dreams, Eleanor made sure he had it. But life has a way of throwing curveballs no one can predict. When Ethan turned 22, something unimaginable happened. One evening, while working late on a project in his room, Ethan suddenly collapsed. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but it was too late. Doctors later revealed that Ethan had suffered from an undiagnosed heart condition, a rare defect that had gone unnoticed throughout his life. It was a devastating blow, not just to Eleanor, but to everyone who knew him. The vibrant young man with so much potential was gone in an instant, leaving behind a void that felt impossible to fill. For Eleanor, the loss was unbearable. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. But the pain refused to fade. She couldn't bring herself to enter Ethan's room, where every book, every model, and every note reminded her of the son she had lost. Sleep eluded her, and even food lost its taste. Her friends and family tried to comfort her, but nothing seemed to help. They encouraged her to seek therapy, to take trips, or to throw herself back into work, but none of those suggestions brought her any relief. Instead, Eleanor found herself consumed by thoughts she couldn't shake. What happens after we die? Is there truly nothing beyond this life? Or is there some kind of existence waiting for us? These questions gnawed at her constantly. Despite having achieved incredible success in business, Eleanor realized she knew very little about the mysteries of life and death. So, she began reading everything she could find on the subject. Books about near-death experiences, scientific studies on consciousness, and philosophical essays about the afterlife became her constant companions. She attended lectures, joined online forums, and even consulted experts in fields like quantum, physics, and neuroscience. Yet no matter how much information she gathered, the answers remained elusive. One day, while scrolling through a documentary about cryonics, the practice of preserving bodies in the hope of reviving them in the future, Eleanor had an idea. What if she could somehow gather evidence about what happens after death? What if she could use her resources to explore the unknown in a way no one else had dared to try? The thought ignited a spark within her, giving her grief a strange sense of purpose. For the first time since Ethan's passing, Eleanor felt driven by something other than sorrow. Her plan was unconventional, to say the least. Using her wealth and connections, she commissioned a team of engineers to design a tiny, highly durable camera capable of recording continuously for several months. This wasn't just any ordinary camera. It was equipped with advanced infrared sensors, waterproof casing, and a battery designed to last up to 6 months. Once completed, the device was small enough to fit discreetly inside a coffin without drawing attention. Though the idea might have sounded far-fetched, or even morbid to others, Eleanor convinced herself that it was worth pursuing. After all, humanity had always sought to understand the mysteries of the universe. Why should the mystery of death be any different? She justified her actions as a form of groundbreaking research, telling herself that whatever she discovered could potentially change the course of human understanding. Deep down, however, there was another reason driving her. She wanted to feel close to Ethan again. If there was any chance, no matter how slim, that she could catch a glimpse of him, hear his voice, or see some sign of his presence, she was willing to risk everything to find out. With her decision made, Eleanor prepared for the next step. On the day of Ethan's funeral, she stood silently beside his coffin, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. No one, not her closest friends, not her family, knew about the camera hidden inside. To them, it was simply a solemn farewell to a beloved son. But for Eleanor, it marked the beginning of a journey into the unknown, one that would either provide her with answers or leave her more haunted than ever before. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, Eleanor whispered a silent promise to Ethan. "I'll find you," she said under her breath. "Whatever it takes." Eleanor's decision to place a camera inside her son's coffin was not one she took lightly. At first, the idea seemed almost absurd, even to her. She wrestled with doubts and questions that kept her awake at night. Was it ethical? Would Ethan have approved of such an experiment if he were alive? Could she live with the consequences, whatever they might be? Yet, as the days passed, her resolve only grew stronger. She convinced herself that this wasn't just about her grief. It was about pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. If there was even the slightest chance of capturing something extraordinary, something that could shed light on the mysteries of death, then it was worth every risk. To make her plan work, Eleanor needed help. But she couldn't trust just anyone with such a sensitive task. After careful consideration, she reached out to a small team of engineers and tech specialists who had worked on confidential projects for her in the past. These individuals were known for their discretion and expertise, qualities Eleanor valued above all else. When she explained what she wanted, a compact, durable camera capable of recording continuously for months, they didn't bat an eye. Used to handling unusual requests from wealthy clients, they simply nodded and got to work. The design process was meticulous. The camera had to meet several strict requirements. It needed to function in complete darkness, withstand extreme conditions, like moisture and pressure, and operate without interruption for at least 6 months. It also had to be small enough to avoid detection once placed inside the coffin. Every detail mattered, and Eleanor spared no expense. She approved prototypes, tested materials, and reviewed countless iterations until the final product exceeded her expectations. By the time the camera was ready, it looked more like a sleek piece of futuristic technology than a device meant for such a somber purpose. As the funeral approached, Eleanor found herself torn between anticipation and dread. On one hand, she felt a strange sense of excitement about what the camera might capture. Perhaps it would reveal glimpses of another realm, signs of Ethan's spirit lingering nearby, or evidence of some unknown force beyond human comprehension. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the possibility that the footage would show nothing but emptiness, a cold, unyielding reminder of loss. The thought weighed heavily on her, but she refused to back down now. She had come too far to turn back. On the morning of the funeral, Eleanor woke up earlier than usual. Her hands trembled as she carefully retrieved the camera from its protective case. Wrapped in black fabric to blend seamlessly with the interior of the coffin, the device was nearly invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. She double-checked its settings, ensuring it was fully charged and programmed to start recording automatically once activated. Then, with a deep breath, she slipped it into a hidden compartment beneath Ethan's pillow, making sure it was secure yet discreet. The day itself was a blur of emotions. Friends, family members, and acquaintances gathered at the church to pay their respects. Some brought flowers, others shared stories about Ethan, and many offered words of comfort to Eleanor. To everyone present, it was a typical funeral, i.e., Heartbreaking farewell to a young man whose life had been tragically cut short. No one suspected the secret tucked away inside the polished wooden casket. Standing beside the coffin during the service, Eleanor struggled to maintain her composure. Each eulogy, each tearful embrace pierced her heart anew. But beneath the surface, her mind raced with thoughts of the camera. Would it record anything meaningful? Or would it simply document the stillness of the grave? As much as she tried to focus on the ceremony, part of her couldn't stop thinking about what lay ahead. The long wait, the uncertainty, and the potential answers waiting to be uncovered. When the time came to lower the coffin into the ground, Eleanor hesitated. Watching the earth cover her son's final resting place felt surreal, knowing that a piece of her remained buried alongside him. For a brief moment, she questioned whether she was doing the right thing. What if the experiment failed? What if it only deepened her pain instead of providing closure? Shaking off these doubts, she reminded herself of her original goal: to understand, to learn, to push the limits of what was possible. With a heavy heart, she watched as the last shovel of dirt fell into place, sealing both Ethan and the camera beneath the surface. In the days following the funeral, Eleanor threw herself into keeping busy. She attended meetings, signed documents, and made calls as though everything were normal. But inside, her thoughts rarely strayed from the camera. She marked the calendar, counting down the days until she could retrieve it. 6 months felt like an eternity, but she knew patience was crucial. Interrupting the process prematurely could jeopardize the entire experiment. So, she waited, occupying her time with distractions, while secretly longing for the moment when she could finally see the results. During this period, Eleanor became increasingly withdrawn. Though she maintained appearances for her friends and colleagues, those closest to her noticed subtle changes. She spoke less, smiled rarely, and often seemed lost in thought. When pressed, she brushed off concerns, claiming she was simply adjusting to life without Ethan. In truth, her mind was consumed by visions of what the camera might reveal. Would it show shadows moving across the coffin? Faint whispers carried on the wind? Or perhaps something more profound? The possibilities swirled endlessly in her head, fueling both hope and fear. Despite her efforts to stay focused, Eleanor couldn't escape the nagging voice in the back of her mind. What if the footage contained something she wasn't prepared to handle? What if it confirmed her worst fears, that death truly was the end, with no afterlife, no reunion, no continuation of consciousness? The uncertainty gnawed at her, leaving her restless and anxious. Yet, even as doubt crept in, she clung to the belief that the experiment was worth it. Whether it provided answers or raised new questions, it represented a step forward, a way to confront the unknown rather than shy away from it. As the weeks turned into months, Eleanor began preparing for the retrieval. She mapped out the logistics, ensuring she could access the cemetery without drawing attention. Under the cover of darkness, she planned to dig up the coffin, extract the camera, and leave no trace of her actions. It was a risky endeavor, one that required precision and stealth. But Eleanor had always been resourceful, and she trusted her ability to pull it off. By the time the 6th month arrived, Eleanor's nerves were stretched thin. The anticipation was almost unbearable, like standing on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or retreat. On the night she chose to retrieve the camera, she packed a small bag with tools, gloves, and a flashlight, determined to see her plan through to the end. As she drove to the cemetery, her heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment of truth. Whatever the camera had recorded, it was about to change her life forever. Little did Eleanor know, the journey she was embarking on would lead her down paths she could never have imagined. The footage awaiting her held secrets that would challenge everything she thought she knew, not just about death, but about herself and the nature of existence itself. The 6 months following Ethan's burial were some of the longest and most agonizing days of Eleanor's life. Each morning, she woke up with a sense of dread, knowing that another day had passed without answers. The calendar on her wall became both her enemy and her ally, a marker of time ticking away, inching closer to the moment when she could finally retrieve the camera. She tried to distract herself with work, social obligations, and even hobbies she hadn't touched in years. But nothing could fully pull her attention away from the looming question: what did the camera capture? At night, sleep eluded her. When exhaustion finally overtook her, her dreams were filled with fragmented images, darkness, whispers, shadows moving just out of reach. Sometimes, she dreamed of Ethan, his face blurred and distant, calling out to her from somewhere she couldn't quite see. Other times the dreams turned darker, filled with nameless shapes and eerie sounds that left her bolting upright in bed, drenched in sweat. These visions only deepened her obsession with the experiment. Was her mind trying to prepare her for what she might find? Or was it simply torturing her with endless what-ifs? Despite her growing anxiety, Eleanor forced herself to stick to the plan. She marked the exact date on her calendar when she would retrieve the camera, refusing to deviate from the 6-month timeline she had set. To ensure everything went smoothly, she spent weeks meticulously preparing. She studied maps of the cemetery, noting the layout of the grounds and planning her route to avoid detection. She purchased tools, a small shovel, gloves, a flashlight, and practiced using them in secret, rehearsing every step of the process until it felt second nature. Her movements were precise, almost mechanical, as though she were preparing for a mission rather than an act born out of grief. On the night of the retrieval, Eleanor dressed in dark clothing, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She packed her bag carefully, double-checking that she had everything she needed before slipping quietly out of her house. The streets were eerily quiet, the moon casting long shadows across the pavement. As she drove to the cemetery, her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. Every sound, the hum of the car engine, the rustle of leaves outside her window, felt amplified, as if the world itself was holding its breath. When she arrived at the cemetery, Eleanor parked her car far enough away to avoid suspicion. She stepped out into the cool night air, her senses heightened. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets or the distant hoot of an owl. She moved cautiously through the rows of headstones, her flashlight hooded to minimize the light. It didn't take long to locate Ethan's grave. She knew exactly where it was, having visited countless times since his burial. Standing there in the darkness, staring down at the mound of earth that covered her son, she felt a wave of conflicting emotions: grief, guilt, curiosity, and determination, all swirling together in a chaotic mix. Kneeling beside the grave, Eleanor hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering above the soil. This was it, the point of no return. Once she began digging, there would be no turning back. Taking a deep breath, she plunged the shovel into the ground, the sound of dirt scraping against metal echoing softly in the stillness. The work was physically demanding, and soon her arms burned with effort, but she pushed through the discomfort, driven by a singular focus. Layer by layer, she uncovered the coffin, her pulse quickening with each passing minute. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tip of the shovel struck wood. Eleanor paused, her breath catching in her throat. Carefully, she cleared away the remaining dirt, revealing the polished surface of the coffin. For a moment, she simply stared at it, overwhelmed by the weight of what she was about to do. Then, steeling herself, she pried open the lid, her movements slow and deliberate. Inside, everything was just as it had been on the day of the funeral. The soft lining, Ethan's suit, and the faint scent of flowers lingering in the air. And there, hidden beneath his pillow, was the camera. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for it, her fingers brushing against the cold metal casing. She examined it briefly, ensuring it was intact and undamaged. Satisfied, she placed it gently into her bag and began the painstaking process of refilling the grave. Every shovelful of dirt felt heavier than the last, not because of the physical strain, but because of the realization that this chapter of her journey was coming to an end. By the time she smoothed over the surface and replaced the grass sod, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. Back at home, Eleanor locked herself in her study, her mind racing with anticipation. She spread out the tools and equipment she would need to review the footage, her movements quick and efficient. Plugging the camera into her computer, she waited impatiently as the files transferred. When the screen finally flickered to life, displaying the first frame of footage, she leaned forward, her eyes glued to the monitor. At first, all she saw was darkness, the interior of the coffin illuminated only by the faint glow of the camera's infrared sensors. It was unsettling yet expected, and for a while nothing unusual happened. Days passed on the footage, each one blending into the next. There was no movement, no sound, just an unbroken stillness that stretched on endlessly. Eleanor felt a pang of disappointment, though she tried to remind herself that patience was key. Perhaps whatever she was looking for wouldn't appear immediately. She fast-forwarded through sections of the video, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Hours turned into days, and still, nothing changed. Doubt began creeping in. Had the experiment failed? Was she chasing something that didn't exist? But then, on the 5th day of footage, something caught her eye. A shadow moved. Across the frame, subtle yet unmistakable. Eleanor froze, her heart skipping a beat. Rewinding the video, she played it again, scrutinizing every detail. It wasn't dirt shifting or water seeping in. It was something else entirely. The movement was deliberate, almost as if someone, or something, was interacting with the camera. Her pulse quickened as she continued watching, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. Over the next few days of footage, the anomalies grew more frequent. Shadows danced along the edges of the frame, their shapes indistinct, but undeniably present. On the 30th day, the camera captured something that made Eleanor's blood run cold. Faint whispers filled the audio track, barely audible but impossible to ignore. They sounded like voices, layered and distorted, speaking in a language she couldn't understand. She turned up the volume, straining to decipher the words, but they remained elusive, slipping through her grasp like smoke. Panic bubbled beneath the surface as Eleanor realized the implications of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just random interference or a glitch in the system. It was something far beyond her comprehension. Her hands shook as she reached for the pause button, her mind reeling. Part of her wanted to stop right then and there, to shut off the computer and walk away. But another part, the part driven by curiosity and desperation, urged her to keep going. Whatever lay ahead, she told herself she had to see it through to the end. As she hesitated, her gaze drifted to a framed photograph of Ethan sitting on her desk. His smile was warm and familiar, a stark contrast to the eerie images on the screen. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if he would approve of what she was doing. Would he want her to uncover these secrets? Or would he tell her to let go and move on? Shaking off the thought, she steeled herself once more. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about finding answers, no matter how unsettling they might be. With trembling fingers, Eleanor resumed playback, bracing herself for whatever came next. She knew, deep down, that the footage held truths that would challenge everything she believed in. But she also knew that turning back was no longer an option. Whatever waited for her on the screen, she was ready, or as ready as she could ever be, to face it. Eleanor's heart raced as she pressed play again, her eyes glued to the screen. The footage continued, and the strange occurrences grew more pronounced. At first, the shadows had been faint, almost like smudges on the lens or tricks of the light. But now they moved with purpose, shifting, stretching, and retreating in ways that defied explanation. It was as though something unseen was testing the boundaries of the coffin, probing its confines with cautious curiosity. Eleanor leaned closer, her breath shallow, her body tense. She couldn't look away. On the 60th day of recording, the anomalies escalated. A figure appeared in the frame, not human, not animal, but something entirely otherworldly. Its presence filled the small space of the coffin, looming over the camera like a specter. The entity had no discernible face, just a dark void where features should have been. Yet despite its lack of form, it exuded an unsettling intelligence. It tilted its head slightly as if studying the device, its movements deliberate and calculated. Eleanor's hands flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Her mind screamed at her to stop the video, to shut it off and pretend none of this had happened. But she couldn't. Something deep within her, a mix of morbid fascination and desperate hope, kept her rooted to the spot. The whispers grew louder too, overlapping one another in a cacophony of voices. They weren't random sounds. They formed patterns, rhythms, almost like sentences spoken in a language Eleanor didn't recognize. She strained to make out individual words, replaying sections of the audio over and over. Some parts sounded guttural, primal, while others carried a melodic quality that sent shivers down her spine. Each time she thought she might decipher a phrase, the voices shifted, slipping through her grasp like sand between fingers. It was maddening, yet she couldn't bring herself to give up. Then, on the 91st day, something extraordinary happened. The entity returned, standing directly above the coffin once more. This time, however, it did more than observe. It interacted. Its shadowy hand reached out, brushing against the camera lens. The touch was gentle but unmistakable, leaving behind a faint residue that distorted the image momentarily. Eleanor froze, her pulse hammering in her ears. Was this real, or was her grief playing cruel tricks on her mind? She rewound the footage, analyzing every frame, searching for any sign of tampering or malfunction. There was none. Whatever she was seeing, it was authentic. And then came the moment that shattered her composure completely. Amidst the jumble of whispers, a single voice emerged, clear, distinct, and achingly familiar. "Mom," it said softly, the word barely audible but undeniably real. Eleanor's breath hitched, tears welling up in her eyes. She recognized the voice instantly. It was Ethan's. Her son, whose life had been cut tragically short, was somehow speaking to her from beyond the grave. The message repeated 3 times, each utterance carrying the same haunting clarity. "Mom, don't look for me here." Eleanor's world collapsed around her. She let out a strangled cry, clutching the desk for support as her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. Her mind reeled, torn between disbelief and acceptance. How could this be possible? Was it truly Ethan reaching out to her, or was it some trick of her imagination, fueled by grief and guilt? She replayed the segment again and again, listening intently to his voice, memorizing every nuance. It was him, she was certain of it, and yet the implications terrified her. As the video progressed, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they became deafening. The entity loomed closer, its form expanding to fill the entire frame. For a brief moment, Eleanor thought she saw something flicker within the void, eyes perhaps, or fragments of faces, but the image was too fleeting to confirm. Then, without warning, the screen went black. The audio cut off abruptly, plunging her into silence. Eleanor stared at the blank monitor, her chest heaving, her thoughts spiraling out of control. What did it mean? Why had Ethan told her not to? Look for him there? Was he trying to warn her about something or someone? The questions swirled endlessly in her mind, each one more unnerving than the last. She wanted to believe that Ethan's message was meant to comfort her, to assure her that he was at peace. But the tone of his voice suggested otherwise. There was urgency in his words, a plea for her to stop digging deeper. What had she uncovered? And what dangers lay ahead if she continued? Eleanor sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours, the weight of the footage pressing down on her. Every instinct screamed at her to destroy the evidence, to erase the files, smash the camera, and bury the memory alongside her son. Yet part of her resisted. If this was proof of something beyond death, something that science couldn't explain, shouldn't it be shared with the world? Could she really keep such a discovery to herself? The ethical dilemmas gnawed at her, adding another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. Her thoughts drifted back to the moments leading up to the funeral, the secrecy, the sleepless nights spent planning the experiment, the sheer audacity of placing a camera inside her son's coffin. Had she gone too far? Was this punishment for meddling in forces she couldn't understand? The guilt weighed heavily on her shoulders, compounding the fear and confusion swirling inside her. She had set out to find answers, to bridge the gap between life and death, but instead, she had opened a door she wasn't sure she could close. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her, and she slumped forward, resting her forehead against the cool surface of the desk. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: grief, terror, awe, and regret, all colliding in a chaotic storm. She knew she needed to make a decision soon, whether to share the footage, destroy it, or simply walk away and try to forget everything she had seen. But for now, all she could do was sit in the dim light of her study, staring at the empty screen, haunted by the knowledge that the line between life and death was far thinner and far stranger than she had ever imagined. The days that followed the discovery of the footage were a blur for Eleanor. She couldn't shake the images and sounds from her mind, the shadowy figure, the whispers, and most of all, Ethan's voice pleading with her not to look for him. Sleep became an impossible luxury. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the void where the entity had stood, its presence lingering like a stain on her thoughts. Food tasted like ash in her mouth, and even the simplest tasks, brushing her hair, answering emails, walking through her house, felt like monumental efforts. Her world had been upended, and she didn't know how to put it back together. Eleanor wrestled with conflicting impulses. Part of her wanted to destroy the camera and every trace of the footage immediately. She imagined tossing the memory card into a roaring fire or smashing the computer to pieces, erasing the evidence as if none of it had ever existed. It would be the safest choice, wouldn't it? To bury this knowledge alongside Ethan and pretend she'd never embarked on such a reckless experiment. But another part of her, the part driven by curiosity and a desperate need for answers, refused to let go. If what she had captured was real, then it wasn't just about her anymore. It was bigger than her grief, bigger than Ethan, bigger than anything she could have anticipated. Could she really turn her back on something so profound? Her internal debate consumed her. She spent hours pacing her study, replaying fragments of the video over and over again. Each time she scrutinized the details, the way the shadows moved, the patterns in the whispers, the clarity of Ethan's voice, as though searching for some hidden clue that might explain everything. Was the entity malevolent, simply curious, or something else entirely? Why had Ethan spoken to her? And what did he mean by, "Don't look for me here"? The more she analyzed, the more questions arose, each one pulling her deeper into a labyrinth of uncertainty. One evening, while staring at the blank screen of her computer, Eleanor decided to reach out for help. Not publicly, not yet, but to someone she trusted implicitly. She called Dr. Marcus Hale, an old friend and former colleague who specialized in quantum physics and consciousness studies. They hadn't spoken in years, but Eleanor knew he was one of the few people capable of approaching the situation with both scientific rigor and open-mindedness. After a brief hesitation, she explained everything: the camera, the footage, the anomalies, and Ethan's message. To her relief, Marcus didn't dismiss her outright. Instead, his voice grew thoughtful, almost reverent. "This is unprecedented," he said slowly after a long pause. "If what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying it isn't, it challenges everything we know about life, death, and the nature of reality itself. You understand the implications, don't you?" Eleanor nodded, though he couldn't see her. "I do," she replied quietly. "But I don't know what to do. Next, should I share this, destroy it, or just try to forget?" Marcus sighed. "That's not a decision I can make for you. But consider this. Whatever you've uncovered, it's powerful. Sharing it could change the course of human understanding, or it could spark panic, hysteria, maybe even violence. On the other hand, destroying it means you're keeping potentially groundbreaking knowledge hidden forever. Either way, there are consequences." His words echoed in Eleanor's mind long after they ended the call. He was right, of course. The stakes were unimaginably high, and the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had always prided herself on being decisive, on making bold choices without hesitation. Yet now, faced with perhaps the most important decision of her life, she felt paralyzed. As the days passed, Eleanor began noticing strange occurrences around her home. At first, they were subtle. A flicker of the lights, a faint tapping sound, coming from empty rooms, a sudden chill in the air. She tried to rationalize them as coincidences or tricks of her overactive imagination, but deep down, she knew better. One night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she heard Ethan's voice again, not on a recording but seemingly from somewhere nearby. "Mom," it whispered, soft and distant, yet unmistakable. Her heart raced as she sat up, scanning the darkness. "Ethan," she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response, only silence. These incidents left Eleanor feeling increasingly unsettled. Was the entity following her? Had her experiment opened some kind of portal, allowing it to cross into her world? Or was it all in her head, a manifestation of guilt and grief masquerading as supernatural phenomena? She couldn't be sure, and the ambiguity gnawed at her sanity. She started carrying the memory card with her everywhere she went, afraid of what might happen if it fell into the wrong hands, or worse, if it disappeared altogether. Desperate for clarity, Eleanor returned to the footage once more. This time, she focused not on the visuals, but on the audio, isolating the whispers and running them through software designed to analyze sound patterns. What she discovered sent chills down her spine. Beneath the overlapping voices, there were distinct tones and frequencies that corresponded to specific emotions: anger, sorrow, longing, even joy. It was as though the whispers carried fragments of countless souls, their voices trapped in some liminal space between worlds, and woven throughout these layers was a single thread of coherence. Ethan's voice, clear and unwavering, repeating the same warning over and over again. "Don't look for me here." The phrase took on new meaning as Eleanor listened to it repeatedly. It wasn't just a plea, it was a command, a directive meant to protect her from something far greater than she could comprehend. Whatever realm the camera had tapped into, it wasn't safe. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be seen or understood by the living. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had crossed a line, ventured into territory humans weren't equipped to navigate, and now she was paying the price. In a moment of clarity, Eleanor made her decision. She gathered every piece of evidence related to the experiment, the camera, the memory card, the transcripts and notes, and locked them away in a secure vault buried beneath her estate. Then, using her considerable resources, she commissioned a team of engineers to build a device capable of permanently erasing digital data. Once the equipment arrived, she fed the memory card into it, watching as the files disintegrated into nothingness. It was a symbolic act as much as a practical one, a way of closing the door she had opened, severing the connection between her world and whatever lay beyond. When the process was complete, Eleanor felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. The weight on her chest lifted slightly, though the scars remained. She knew she would never fully escape the memories of what she had seen and heard, but at least she had taken steps to ensure no one else would stumble upon the same truths. As she walked away from the vault, she whispered a silent apology to Ethan, vowing to honor his wishes and leave the mysteries of the afterlife undisturbed. Yet, even as she tried to move forward, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the shadows stretched long across the walls, she sometimes heard faint whispers drifting through the static of old radios. They were indistinct, fragmented, but she recognized one voice among them, Ethan's. Though the words were garbled, the sentiment was clear. "You did the right thing, Mom." Eleanor's decision to destroy the footage marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life, though it was far from peaceful. The weight of what she had uncovered, and subsequently erased, continued to haunt her. She couldn't unsee the shadows, unhear the whispers, or forget Ethan's voice pleading with her not to look for him. Yet, as the days turned into weeks and then months, she found herself clinging to a fragile sense of normalcy. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to keep her grounded, to remind her that she was still alive while Ethan was somewhere beyond. The changes in Eleanor were subtle at first. She sold off several of her businesses, donating the proceeds to charities focused on scientific research and mental health awareness. Friends and colleagues noticed her withdrawal from public life, attributing it to grief over losing Ethan. But the truth ran deeper. Eleanor no longer felt connected to the world she had once dominated, the boardrooms, the galas, the endless pursuit of wealth and influence. Those things seemed trivial now, hollow compared to the mysteries she had glimpsed. Instead, she retreated to a secluded estate nestled in the countryside, far away from prying eyes and idle gossip. Her days fell into a quiet rhythm. Mornings began with long walks through the forest surrounding her property, the crisp air filling her lungs as sunlight filtered through the trees. She spent afternoons reading books on philosophy, spirituality, and quantum mechanics, searching for answers that might help her make sense of her experience. Evenings were reserved for meditation, a practice she had never considered before but now relied on to calm her restless mind. At night, when sleep eluded her, she sat by the window staring out at the stars and wondering if Ethan was somewhere among them, watching over her. Despite her efforts to move forward, the past refused to let go. Late at night, when the house was silent and the darkness pressed in, Eleanor sometimes heard faint whispers emanating from the static of old radios. They were fragmented, indistinct, like echoes of voices carried across great distances. And yet, amidst the chaos, one voice stood out. Ethan's. Though the words were often garbled, the sentiment was clear. "You did the right thing, Mom." Each time she heard it, tears welled up in her eyes, a mixture of sorrow and gratitude, washing over her. It was as if he was trying to reassure her, to tell her that she hadn't failed him, that she had honored his wishes, even when it hurt. Over time, Eleanor came to accept that some questions would never have answers. The footage had revealed glimpses of something extraordinary, something beyond human comprehension, but it had also left her with more uncertainty than certainty. Was the entity in the coffin malevolent, benevolent, or simply indifferent? Had Ethan truly reached out to her, or was his voice a projection of her own longing and guilt? These questions swirled endlessly in her mind, but she learned to live with them, to embrace the mystery rather than fight against it. Her relationships with others changed as well. Friends and family who had once been close grew distant, unable to understand why she had withdrawn so completely. Some accused her of shutting people out, of letting grief consume her. But Eleanor didn't care. She knew they could never grasp the enormity of what she had experienced, nor did she feel compelled to explain it to them. Instead, she sought solace in solitude, finding comfort in the silence and the simplicity of her new routine. There were moments, however, when she allowed herself to reconnect with the outside world. On rare occasions, she attended lectures or conferences on topics related to consciousness and the afterlife, listening intently as experts debated theories she now understood in ways they never could. She avoided drawing attention to herself, sitting quietly in the back of the room, absorbing every word without offering her own perspective. Once, during a panel discussion about near-death experiences, someone mentioned the idea that death might not be an end but a transition, a doorway to another plane of existence. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine, recognizing the truth in those words. She wanted to speak up, to share what she knew, but she bit her tongue. Some secrets weren't meant to be told. As years passed, Eleanor's focus shifted inward. She began journaling, documenting her thoughts and reflections on life, death, and everything in between. Her writings were deeply personal, filled with raw emotion and philosophical musings. She never intended for anyone else to read them. They were a way for her to process her feelings, to untangle the web of emotions that still lingered within her. Yet as she filled page after page, she realized she was leaving behind a legacy, not of wealth or power, but of introspection and wisdom. Perhaps someday, someone would find her journals and gain insight into the complexities of the human spirit. One day, while exploring the attic of her estate, Eleanor stumbled upon an old box containing photographs and mementos from Ethan's childhood. Smiling faces stared back at her from yellowed Polaroids, capturing moments frozen in time. There was Ethan as a toddler, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Ethan as a teenager, proudly holding up a model rocket he had built. Ethan on graduation day, his cap slightly askew as he grinned at the camera. Tears streamed down her face as she sifted through the memories, each one a reminder of the joy he had brought into her life. That evening, Eleanor lit a candle and placed it on the windowsill, a symbolic gesture to honor Ethan's memory. She whispered a prayer, not to any specific deity but to the universe itself, asking for peace and understanding. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of closure, as though she had finally made peace with the choices she had made. She had crossed boundaries no one should ever cross, faced truths that defied explanation, and emerged on the other side scarred but stronger. In the end, Eleanor came to realize that her journey wasn't just about uncovering the mysteries of death, it was about learning how to live with them. She had started out driven by grief and curiosity, desperate to find Ethan again, but along the way she had discovered something equally profound: the resilience of the human spirit. Life was messy, unpredictable, and often painful, but it was also beautiful in its imperfection. And though Ethan was gone, his presence remained etched in her heart, guiding her toward a future shaped by love rather than loss. Years later, when Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep, those who knew her remembered her not as the billionaire who had vanished from public life, but as a woman who had embraced the unknown with courage and grace. Her journals were discovered tucked away in a drawer, their pages filled with insights that inspired generations to come. And though the story of the camera in the coffin faded into legend, its lessons endured, a testament to the enduring bond between a mother and her son, and the infinite possibilities that lie beyond the veil of mortality.